Welcome everyone to our Introduction to Community Communication Strategy webinar. The Building Better Regions Community of Practice has heard from coalitions across the COP that communicating with different stakeholders, whether they're funders, community members, or the public, is critical for their success. And for some coalitions and individuals, this can be a new challenge and opportunity. Today is the first in a series of communication webinars that we are hosting with Forum One, addressing different elements of communication strategies. Forum One is a communications consultant that works with us here at the COP on our communication strategy. You can see in the chat details about the 3 upcoming webinars and links to register for them. This session will be recorded so that we can share it afterwards and so that you can use it as a resource for your future work as well as sharing with your colleagues. But we will stop recording when it is time for the Q&A. So if there are any questions you would like to ask without being recorded, you'll have that opportunity. With that, I'll pass it over to Melody from Forum One.
Thanks so much, Pearl. And I think Lindsay's going to share her screen with our presentation slides. But yeah, thank you so much. We're super excited to be here. It's been such a pleasure to work with RTI on their communications efforts for the COP. It's been over a year now that we've been helping create a plan and implement communications efforts for the Building Better Regions community of practice. And I've really enjoyed learning more about the coalitions and the different economic development efforts that are happening all over the country. It's been really amazing. So super excited about this opportunity, and we're grateful for a chance to talk a little bit about how to build a communications plan. So just a quick note about Forum One. We are a small consulting firm who works with nonprofit and government clients who are mission-driven. We offer several different services: digital communications, data, strategy, technology, and design. And the vision of Forum One is to create a more equitable, inspiring, and healthy world. Lindsay and I are both on the strategic communications team. I am Melody Hood. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I've worked at Forum One for about 6 years now, helping clients with writing and optimizing their digital content. I do a lot with email marketing and campaign work, and then obviously have a lot of experience helping clients create and implement their communications plans. And prior to coming to Forum One, I was in-house at a couple different nonprofits doing similar work as well. So I'll hand it over to my colleague, Lindsay.
Thanks, Melody. I'm Lindsay. I'm based in Ohio. Like Melody said, work with her on the strategy team at Forum One. I've been there for about 3 years now, full time. Previously, I come from a background within public relations and marketing. So I've worked through a wide range of the communication spectrum, but strategy and strategic communications is definitely one of my favorite topics. So I'm so excited to be here and kicking off this webinar series with all of you. And I think we're set to just dive right in with the content for today. So first up, we want to kick things off with a quick overview of what strategic communications is. I know it's a bit in the definition. Strategic communications is the strategy behind your communications efforts, but there is a commonly told definition. So I wanted to share that with all of you to make sure we're on the same page. And that is that strategic communications ensures that the right message is shared with the right people at the right time and through the right channels. Like I said, I think that's a commonly shared, simplified definition, but I think we can probably take this and simplify it even one step further and saying that strategic communications is really about connecting with the people that you need to reach in a way that both they and you understand. So to be clear, we're not always talking here about a megaphone approach. Occasionally you'll see that where you really need to just have you speaking to your audience, but more often than not, especially these days, it's more focused on having a conversation. So I'm sure you're tired of hearing this, but we are in a world where information is exchanged rapidly. Attention spans are really short. I know research commonly suggests you only have about 8 seconds to grab the attention of your audience. And I wouldn't be surprised. I think that that number is probably decreasing as we speak. So it's more important than ever to have some more strategy behind your communications effort and really create that cycle of feedback. So it's not just you speaking your message to your audience, but also making sure that your audience has the ability to get their message right back to you, which I think is just so essential in building relationships, driving success, shaping opinions, and then navigating those complexities that we talked about of rapid information sharing. So here's why we're here today, which is to talk about the strategic communications plan. This is really the heart of strategic communications, as Pearl mentioned earlier. This is the start to a webinar series. So we'll be talking later about social media, media outreach, and messaging, but all of those elements really start here at the plan. By definition, a strategic communications plan is really just direction for both internal and external stakeholders around their communications efforts. One note here, external doesn't have to mean outside of your organization. I know coalitions are made up of different entities, so external can mean just a different entity within a coalition. It can even mean within your specific organization. It could be the finance department if it's a more internal focused communications plan. So just want to make sure that when we're defining your communications plan, external is within whatever your context is. There are a lot of different use cases for communications plan. We frequently advise an overarching communications plan for your organization that's a bit more long-term and in line with your organization's goals, marketing, and all of that working together. But often you can have them for more specific use cases like a campaign or just for an upcoming event. It really allows you to use your resources effectively and efficiently. So one of the biggest things that we hear from clients is that they have a hard time convincing their leadership team to pause at the beginning of a project and create a communications plan. I know it's a lot of time and money and resources that you don't always want to spend the time to put for a plan, but I think that really the value in a plan is that it's going to save you on all of that as you go. So to help highlight that a little more, we have just a few 3 values that we think a plan will bring to your organization. Starting with clarity. So this is really just about ensuring that your team is on the same page. We'll talk a little bit more about elements that you can include in your plan down the line here, but you're going to have the opportunity to outline roles and responsibilities of your team so that you know who owns what activity and then save you the guessing as you implement your communications efforts. I think this is helpful really in all contexts of communications, but especially when crisis communications needs arise. You don't want to have to spend time figuring out who owns what communications element. So taking just a little bit of time at the beginning to get prepared and have that all outlined is going to save you in the end. Next up, we have consistency. This is really about creating unity around your messaging. So you're not going to have different team members sharing conflicting messages, and you're just going to have a little bit more consistency around what it is that you're saying. And in the end, that helps you to build trust and accountability with your audience and even grow your branded organizational recognition and reputation. And third, we have measurability. So in a little bit here, we're going to get into the elements of a communications plan here soon, I promise. And we're going to see a little bit more about how to measure it and setting some key performance indicators. And this will help you to make data-driven decisions for continuous improvement. So with a plan, you're able to set a baseline and then see if your efforts are effective. And then that leads me into our bonus tip on why it's valuable, which is adaptability. A plan does not mean that you are not flexible. I think it's the opposite. Having a plan is going to let you see what's working and iterate and quickly adjust in a fast-paced environment while keeping to your brand identity. So a plan is not just a straight line from A to B and you can't ever move off of it. I like to think of it more of a roadmap where you are more of a guide and you can have curves and you just basically, you have your starting point and you have your end goal, but how you get there can change based on your needs at the time. So that is why you need a plan. And then next we're going to move through how you can actually start to build one.
Thanks, Lindsey. Yeah, so how to build your plan. We definitely recommend that you start with research. There's a lot of different ways you can research before beginning your plan, but the whole point is to make sure that you understand the current state of where you're at so that you can make plans for your future. So there's a lot of different ways you can research. Some of these do require more budget and time and resources. So you'll want to pick what makes sense for you in your context and kind of the level of effort that makes sense for the type of plan that you're creating. But we definitely recommend always beginning with an analysis of your current communications efforts and content. So this is your desk research, look through all of the channels that you use, look at the metrics that you have access to. How is your website performing? If you post to social media, what are the returns that you're seeing there? How are people interacting with your email outreach? Just kind of look at everything that you've been doing, see what's working, notice what gaps exist. And then if you have the opportunity, it's also useful to look at other organizations that are similar to you and kind of do a landscape analysis. What are your competitors, your partners doing? What channels are they on? Kind of see what you can learn from them as well. And then outside of desk research, if you have a little bit more capacity, we often will work with clients on doing focus groups or surveys, especially of their audiences. So it's really helpful to reach out to the audiences, maybe your current audiences, or if you're trying to expand and reach new people. If you have the opportunity to do to ask some questions and get feedback, that can really help inform the plan that you put together. And then workshops. We often do a lot of workshops with our clients. These are usually more internally focused. So these are for your internal folks of your organization. You want to make sure the people in the workshop are the people who are going to be doing the work, or maybe the people also who are the decision makers or key leadership where you want them to have buy-in. So we do a lot of different workshops around setting goals or maybe defining and prioritizing audiences. And they can just be really great spaces to brainstorm and really make sure everyone's on the same page and that you have a solid foundation when you start to put together your plan. So once you have a good understanding of your context and where you're at, then you'll be well equipped to put together a relevant and useful plan. And like Lindsey said, all of this information will help you create a baseline so that you can define success, set your KPIs, and really know what your goals are going to be. One final note, that was a lot. And I know everyone's busy and there's competing priorities, but we do just want to emphasize the importance of talking to your audience as much as possible, keeping your audiences front and center. So try to find ways to do that. If you're able to be out and chatting with people, or put a quick was this helpful feedback on something. As much as you can hear back from the people that you're interacting with and trying to reach, the better. If you don't directly connect with people, maybe talk to your colleagues who do, hear what feedback they're getting, maybe give them some questions to ask, but really just keep your audience in mind and get as much information about them from them as possible. So we're going to move into talking about the key elements in every communications plan. Like Lindsey mentioned, you can have a very overarching longer term plan, as well as shorter specific plans tied to campaigns or events that you might be doing. But either way, there are kind of 4 key elements in every communications plan. And we actually have a communications plan template that we put together. It's in the resource library. We've linked to it in the slides. And then I believe Pearl will also send an email with that for you all to have it. It's just a Word document, but hopefully it can be useful to get you started. And it kind of walks through where you can input these 4 pieces. So I'll hand it over to Lindsey to kind of walk through each of these elements.
Great, thanks. So we wanted to dive in a little bit deeper into each of these elements. So starting with goals, these are going to be one of the first parts of your plan, and then everything else within your communications plan is going to help you to achieve these goals. Important to note that your communications plan goals should be in line with the overarching goals of your organization. So there shouldn't be any conflict in what you're communicating to your audience versus what your organization is trying to do, everything within your communications efforts is going to support your overarching organization. So up here on the screen, we just have a few very general examples of the types of goals you might think about. One, depending again on your organization, could be to increase awareness. You could have another goal to build and strengthen relationships with your stakeholders, or maybe you have a goal to educate and inform your audiences. Whatever they are, you want to make them as specific as possible. So to highlight maybe a little bit better, more specific example, we have a scenario for you to consider. So here it is. Imagine that there is an organization focused on building manufacturing capabilities through a workforce training and job placement program. They have an organizational goal of training 12 new people each quarter. So they decide that they're going to create a communications plan to help them achieve this organizational goal for a successful program. In this specific scenario, a couple of their goals could be to, one, make sure potential recruits are aware of the program and know how to apply. Or another goal they could have is to showcase that the program is successful so that they can raise money to sustain it long term. So hopefully that just helps you to see a little bit more of the connection between your organization and how your communications efforts are going to support that. Like I said, your goals are really going to set the tone for the rest of your plan. Which leads us into audiences. I think that setting your audience groups is probably one of the more important parts of your plan. If you remember the first definition we shared, it's about getting the right message to the right people. So this is the right people element of that. You can have multiple audience groups. Not every group will have the same wants and needs. So for example, we see audience groups very generally at a high level of local community members, policymakers, or journalists and influencers. And each group could have different messages and tactics that they need to resonate with them. In our job training organization example, they could have primary audiences of potential recruits, maybe funders. These can be broken down and segmented as many times as you need. You can also include secondary audiences that you want to think about when tailoring your communications efforts. So within our example, you can have a secondary audience of potential and current training partners. Whatever you end up deciding, just know that your audiences are key to ensuring that your messaging is getting out to the right people. So this is definitely a part of the plan where you want to spend some time on, as Melody mentioned earlier, talking about the research. Something that we have to help with that is creating an audience persona. Up on the screen here is just a quick template of something that we have used in the past, but there are really a lot of sample templates for how to do this. The idea here is just that creating a persona can be useful in identifying and targeting your audiences. So it's a way to think through who all the stakeholders are that you need to reach, and then get as specific as possible with their wants and needs. So like Melody had mentioned previously, when you're talking with your audience and stakeholders in the research phase, take note and think about what are their goals and motivators, what are their pain points, how are they getting their information, what do you want them to do, and then split those answers and create different audience groups, and then you will have your personas. So they don't take too much time to do, but I think it's really helpful in knowing who to target your messaging to. And that leads us into our key messages, their third element that we see in all of our communications plans. This is really what you want your audience to know and what do you want them to do. Your key messages are going to be tailored to the specific context of your communications plan. And I want to really emphasize here that these are the main idea that you're trying to get across. So this is not the final language, whatever you draft here. If you're having a key message that you want to put in a press release, that language is probably not going to be word for word as what you're using in a digital advertisement to get that same theme across. So it can be tweaked across channels and audiences, but really these are just the main themes that you want to communicate. Examples we have on the screen here are maybe you want to write some language around what your value proposition is. Maybe you want to spotlight achievements or awards, or maybe even you're doing a campaign around sharing some compelling data and stories and you want to have a draft of that language. So that's really the themes to think about. If you want to get even a little bit more specific in what language you could have for our scenario, you might draft a blurb of why people want to take the training. Maybe there's some impact that it's having on individuals in the community, and you have some data points. That's great to get out there and showcase some ROI for funders. So really make sure your key messages are what you want your audience to know and specific to your campaign. To help you with this, we have a template here. This template is actually, I think, in the communications plan template that Melody mentioned earlier. So you will have this as well. This, I think, is just a really good starting point. As you can see here, we start with the unique value proposition. What does your organization offer? What distinguishes you from other groups? This doesn't necessarily have to be newly created for your communications plan. If you have a value proposition already for your organization, that's great to include here. Under that, we have the 3 core messages. This is where you're going to write out that draft language we just talked about. You can have more than 3. I just like things in 3s. I think it makes it really easy and simple to understand. And you don't want to have too many key messages because these are really focused on just the main points that you're trying to get out. And then underneath that, we have a spot to include any data supporting evidence that you want to make sure reaches your audience. And then also just another section where you can outline what calls to action you want your audience to take. So this just helps you to outline that as you start thinking about what messages you want to share with your audience. And we'll end on our key elements talking about tactics. These, I think, are my favorite to create because you can get as creative as you want and can with these. These are going to be your action items, what you're actually implementing throughout your communications plan. You should get as specific as possible with these. So again, on the slide, these are very general. In real life, you'd probably have it a little bit more tailored and specific, but they're things like implementing a social media advertising campaign, maybe submitting an op-ed, maybe you want to host a webinar series, whatever it is, just make sure that it's in line and it's a way for you to meet your goals that you set out to do. To get as specific as possible of these, think about a timeline. When and how long are you going to implement each tactic for? Think about the budget, required resources for each one. We talked earlier about making your plan very measurable. This is where you can add in those KPIs, test and iterate your tactics, see what's working, see what changes you need to make. And then, like I said, get as specific as possible. So if we had a tactic for our scenario to write a series of blog posts that show the impact of your program, when you're thinking about that tactic, you want to also include the time and the frequency, the outlet. Are you going to post the blog on your website? Are you going to post it on a partner's website? What are your blog topics? So if you're going to do a blog in August, what is it going to be about? Really, just the more specific you can get, the better. And I don't know, these are where I think the most time can be spent, just because you can get very creative with all of these. But these are just some of the key elements that we see consistently in plans, and there's a lot else you can consider. So I'll throw it back to Melody to talk about those.
Yeah, so those are the main things, but there's lots of other elements that I often see or include in communications plans. So you want to add whatever's going to be most relevant for you and allow you to have the most success in your work. Other common elements that I see in comms plans are adding a content calendar. You know, if you have a goal of doing more content, doing that blog series that Lindsey mentioned, having it outlined of, you know, the cadence of your posting, where they're going to be, how often, who's responsible. That information can be really valuable to include in your plan. Often, you know, including budget is useful, how much resources are going to go into each of the tactics. And then roles and responsibilities, I definitely recommend including who the owners are, who needs to be brought in, you know, if there's different teams who own different tactics, make sure that's clear. And then depending on your organization, there might be crisis communications needs that you have that you can plan for, include that information in your comms plan. So the template we created is kind of basic, but feel free to build on it and add to it so that it has the information that's going to allow you to know how to move forward. once you have your plan, obviously you'll need to figure out who all needs to review and approve and sign off on it. But make sure that everyone who is going to be doing the work is aware of the plan, has seen it, like knows where it exists, and then that you set up a cadence for checking in regularly. Use the plan as a way to see what to prioritize when new opportunities come along. Go look at your plan. Are they in line with the goals? Is it to the right audience? Is this something new? That doesn't mean you can't change the plan. Like we've said, you can be flexible, you can make adjustments, but I often really appreciate having that comms plan as just kind of the source of truth to go back to and remind my team, like, remember, this is the focus. Do we want to make that change? We might need to make some adjustments if so. So it really just serves as a tool to help you prioritize and really make sure that the work that you're doing is as effective and efficient as possible. So hopefully that was all pretty helpful. We'll have one more slide to close with when we're kind of wrapping up, but would love to open the floor now to questions. I've also added my email address here. Would love to follow up if you have additional thoughts or questions after this. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah, would love to hear if anyone has any questions. Thanks so much. Thanks, Carl. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy Tuesday to have this conversation with us. Just kind of a quick recap. Once you have a plan, please use it. Communications plans are so useful in keeping you on task, making sure you're pursuing things that are in scope and will ultimately help you reach your goals. Again, super important to understand your audiences as much as possible. But don't be overwhelmed. You can start small, just a couple audiences or a couple messages, do something small and then build on it, figure out what's working and go from there. And then you can always do more research. You can go back and do those surveys or focus groups or things that you didn't have time to do at the beginning. But definitely want to emphasize the importance of testing, iterating, and continuing to learn and grow as you go. So hopefully you're able to create a communications plan that will allow you to be more strategic and optimize your efforts. So again, feel free to email me if anything else comes up. We'd love to connect. But thank you so much for joining us and hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.